John Iannuzzi, News Director, WPKN 89.5 FM, streaming worldwide at WPKN.org. I recently was pleased to have in studio with me CEO of Connecticut Housing Partners, Renee Dobos. And Renee went over some of the projects that the Housing Partners are very proud of, successful projects. But she also discussed some of the challenges that the Housing Partners face here in Connecticut, specifically Fairfield County, finding affordable housing, working on projects that have very long time frames attached to them at a time when people urgently need housing. I guess first off, it's not a surprise to anyone that housing is an issue here in Fairfield County.
Correct.
Tell us about what Connecticut Housing Partners does. This is a statewide project?
So Connecticut Housing Partners has been in business for more than 30 years, and we're developers and managers of affordable housing. Our primary footprint is in Fairfield County, but we're slowly bleeding northward.
Why is that?
Because of the opportunities and, the competitiveness of the applications that we put in through the state for the tax credits and other funding. They have certain parameters, so we want to make sure that our projects score well so that we receive the funding, because there's a long lead time to be able to receive that funding. So for instance, as an example, transit-oriented districts is very hot right now with the state. They really want to do a lot more building there because they're feeling that moderate income folks need access to transportation so they can get to their work.
So explain that means just building housing or getting housing around places where people can commute?
Yes.
Well, how do you do that? That's tough.
It is tough, and it makes it difficult. It makes it hard to find the opportunities to do that. So, in some sense, we're kind of following the train tracks north so that we can find those opportunities.
How much more complicated did this get during COVID?
To be honest with you, it didn't at all. The state made construction as a primary aspect of our society, and that we needed to continue construction. And we actually had a huge project that we did a major rehabilitation of a 32-unit family development during COVID. So, we had contractors on site. The state, they worked from home, but they would do remote things. And that's when Zoom became part of our lives. And construction meetings, instead of happening on site, were happening over Zoom.
I guess the most logical question is, if we're all feeling confused by where to go next. I mean, I was looking for a home probably at the worst possible time. Mm-hmm. And one stroke of luck after another, and things worked out. But we were pretty close to having to get out of Dodge. Mm-hmm. This area has had this problem for a long time. How do organizations like yours deal with that?
Well, we're trying to build as fast as possible, and we're also, we have a consulting arm. We're also partnering with smaller nonprofits who don't have the capacity that we have so that they can build some opportunities as well. And so with all of us working together, we're very laser focused. The governor's focused. Our state assembly appears to be focused. Our congressmen and senators are very focused on the affordable housing issue. So there's money, a lot of money for the first time that we haven't seen in quite a few years. So there's an infusion of cash going into the Department of Housing so that all of us can build our pipeline and be able to build as much as possible. The commissioner, Sela Mascaro Bruno, she's kind of giving us a 3-year window to say, listen, I have this money, you need to help me spend it. And so that's what we're trying to do.
That's a good problem.
Yes, exactly.
We don't get political. We just report what we hear. Mm-hmm. The governor was accused of maybe painting a little rosier than reality type picture about the housing situation in the state. Just this week I read something about that. What is the reality of the situation right now?
The reality is very stark. So if we're talking about affordable housing, which is basically 80% area median income and below households, we have a shortage of 86,000 units. The funding that the governor is putting forth, he's hoping in the next 2 to 3 years to build 6,400 units of affordable housing. That sounds like a lot, but when you think about the shortage that we're experiencing, it really is just putting a little dent into it. And, regardless of your political situation, we have all of these migrants coming into the country. Where are they going to live? That's going to exacerbate the process.
Has that become an issue for your organization yet?
We have started to see people who are looking for housing that are immigrants, yes. And there's been some other organizations that actually help support the immigrants in helping them obtain housing. They've reached out to us as well. Unfortunately, we have a wait list process. No one can jump the line, basically.
What is the wait list?
So a wait list is you apply for housing and say you need a 1-bedroom. You put your application in and you go enter the wait list, and maybe you're number 50. There could be 49 people ahead of you waiting for this housing. So as apartments become available, we pluck, first, second, third that's on the wait list, and that's how people gain access to housing. It's not the greatest system, but it is what it is. So,
is there any consideration given to, say, a single mom with kids or something like that? When I see organizations, and I don't want to jump ahead, but I was given a list of some of the CHP developments, and I'm familiar with some of them. I mentioned that I do a radio program with a large real estate developer in Shelton, and he was telling me very candidly about how moved he was by seeing, the work done by an organization like Merton House. And that's specifically for moms with kids that have no place to go.
So Merton House is very unique. That is a classification of affordable housing called supportive housing. These are actually folks that are coming out of the homeless shelters. That's a huge priority for the state as well. We want to empty our homeless shelters. And so we go through what they call the Coordinated Access Network. The acronym is CAN. And so we coordinate with a social worker who has access to these folks that are in the shelter, and that's how they enter into our housing. Merton House is mostly women with children. Most of them have been homeless for some time. They're couch hopping. They're living out of their cars. There's all different types of scenarios and stories surrounding these particular folks. So we're looking to build more supportive housing because that's also a priority of the state. And we also have additional supportive housing down in Stamford, where we're taking single adults out of the homeless shelter. And we work very closely with Pacific House as well, which is a homeless shelter for men. And then they also have some of their own affordable housing where they help house folks. So because we have a close relationship, if I have an opening in one of my units, I can reach out to Pacific House and say, hey, I have an opening. Do you have someone, that can go into my unit? So, we're a small community and we work together. Income
disparity, it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. But boy, in Fairfield County, is it more complicated than other areas. I do a radio show here in Bridgeport, and then I'm also on the air down in Greenwich. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's just unbelievable. Does that present challenges or are there opportunities there? There's a lot of philanthropic people around.
I think it presents both. It isn't one or the other. There are certain cities like Stamford and Norwalk who truly recognize they have a need for affordable housing if they don't want a big part of their population moving out of the city. So they're very affordable housing friendly. Then you have some of the smaller suburbs that are not so friendly towards affordable housing. The acronym we use is NIMBYism, or not in my backyard. And so we try to work with these municipalities. Right now, we're looking to build a brand new development in Monroe. It will be a senior housing development. And we had to really work with the municipality for about a year. And we actually brought them to our properties so that they can imagine what they would have in their community. There's a lot of pressure being placed on these municipalities through the state to get to 10% affordable housing. 10% of their units are affordable. Some towns are embracing that and others are slow to embrace it.
Are there timelines on that 10%?
They all had to put in an affordability plan to the state, and most have done it. There's still some municipalities that haven't submitted it yet. I believe Bridgeport's one of those that has not submitted theirs yet. They are working on it. I've seen the banter going back and forth about it because it's a complex way to try to think about their communities and try to say, where do we need this housing? How much of it do we need? Even though the state is saying 10%, there could be some communities that need more. There could be communities like larger cities that may need 20% or 30%. So they have to think about all of those things.
How did you end up here?
So I've been in housing for a long time. Before I came to Connecticut Housing Partners, I was the chief operating officer for the New Haven Housing Authority, also known as Elm City Communities. So I was there for about 10 years, and that's where I was really introduced into affordable housing and the HUD way. That's where I learned the HUD way. And what I like about
HUD housing.
Well, HUD funds housing authorities, so HUD has their way of doing things. And so about being in New Haven, we had a very large portfolio, 2,500 units, but you can only operate within the city limits of New Haven. And so what attracted me to Connecticut Housing Partners is that my footprint could be expanded beyond a city limit. And so I found that very exciting. And then the other thing is that we were able to tap into many different programs. So, some of my buildings are funded by HUD. I have tax credit properties. I have supportive housing properties that are funded by the Department of Housing. So I'm able to tap into much more diverse funding opportunities. And so that's been exciting for me. And I am committed to affordable housing. I do think it's really important. I think all communities need it because everyone seems to think it's, just poor people. Well, it isn't. It's our sons and daughters who are trying to move out for the first time. Especially in Fairfield County, based on the current minimum wage, you need to work 2.5 jobs to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. It's our parents and our grandparents who are trying to downsize and wanting to be able to afford to live with their fixed retirement income. And then, of course, it's our teachers. I have teachers that live with us. They're teaching in your community, but they can't afford to live in your community that they're teaching, so they have to commute. It's firemen, it's police. That's the demographic that we're looking at that needs the affordable housing. We also partner with a lot of the market rate developers, especially in Norwalk and Stamford. And 10% of their units are set aside for workforce housing. And so we do the compliance for them and do the screening to make sure that the people are qualified. And so I'm really excited about that trend, too, because right now we're not allowed to use tax credits for workforce housing, which I think is really important.
Can you explain workforce housing?
So workforce housing is a higher income limit. It's 80% area median income and below, whereas right now a tax credit property in the state is 60% and below. So the 80% is really targeting that workforce that's working in your community. And so right now I know that the application process, they're talking about allowing tax credits to be able to fund workforce housing, which historically that hasn't been the case. So I'm really pushing for that. I'm advocating for that. And I will definitely be tapping into that if that takes place.
Do you want to walk us through any of these other projects that you're proud of, maybe right here in our backyard at WPKN, maybe Maplewood Avenue in Bridgeport? I understand that CHP had a big hand in that. So
we actually own that property. As we own Merton House, we own Maplewood. During COVID, that was the property we did the $13 million rehabilitation. The governor actually came down to that property and did a press conference when he announced that he was putting in $600 million into affordable housing. And he said he's trying to attract business into the state. And he said when he's talking to these business folks, the first question he's being asked, where are my employees going to live? And so that's really kind of smacking him between the eyes because he's recognizing that I want to bring business in, but then they have no place to live. And so that makes it really challenging for him. And that's why he's invested to create more affordable housing. So it is about the workforce. That's what it's really about, affordable housing, making sure we have a healthy workforce.
So who's doing it right? I mean, you mentioned New Haven. That's where you are out of, right? Mm-hmm. Who's doing it right? What are you using as an example, a blueprint?
I think there's a lot of us that are doing it right. We're actually charter members of NeighborWorks. We're one of 7 organizations in the state of Connecticut that are members of NeighborWorks. And in the entire country, there's only 250 organizations that are members of NeighborWorks, and so that's our lobbying
Should
arm.
I know what NeighborWorks does?
NeighborWorks is actually funded by Congress, and they are proponents of affordable housing. They funnel that money into our local communities, and then we're able to leverage that funding to be able to attract additional funding so that we can build affordable housing. And they also support first-time homeowners training, so people can buy a home for the first-time home ownership. They provide a lot of training for all of the members that are part of NeighborWorks. We go down on the Hill in March and we lobby with our senators and congressmen to make them understand how important affordable housing is and to continue funding NeighborWorks, which is really important. I think this past year in March, the ask that we made was $185 million that would be spread across the country. And I believe NeighborWorks funnels about 80% of that funding down to the different organizations like myself. So it's really important. And I have sister colleagues, one's in New Haven, one's in Hartford. We speak frequently, we collaborate frequently. And, we bounce ideas off of each other and also some of our problems and to how do we try to cure this problem.
Let's go back, I guess, to the senior housing aspect. My parents were just in that boat, downsized from Westchester County, wanted to be closer to my sister and myself here in Connecticut. Things worked out for them, but there's a lot of people who maybe are not that fortunate.
That is very true. And so I'll tell you a story that recently happened. I had someone reach out to me and basically told me that their mother was living in her house and it was being foreclosed upon. She had a fixed income and she wasn't able to afford all the different costs associated with living in this house. So she lost her house. And they reached out to me and they said, Renee, can you please help me? I need to find a place for my mother. So I was able to help that family. I was able to get them to move into Wilton. And the family was just shocked and awed at the quality that we deliver for housing. So if you go to our Wilton Commons complex, it's not just a bunch of apartments. We have a dining room, so our congregate residents are able to receive one hot meal a day. We do light housekeeping in their units once a week. We have a chapel. Community rooms, there's a hairdresser that comes on site. So we try to make it as much about your home. It's your home and feeling like it's your home and having that collaboration with your neighbors. We have a social worker on site who provides some programming because, we want people to come out of their units and socialize, especially for seniors. During COVID, that part of the population that lives with us, they were harmed the most. And they were really isolated, and it was really challenging for them. And we did all that we could to try to engage them mentally, like putting puzzle books outside their door, or we'd have the kids come and sing Christmas carols out in the parking lot so that they could hear them. So we were trying to be as creative as possible to try to keep them stimulated because it was really a difficult time for them. In building affordable housing, I can't go to one place and get funding to be able to build it. I have to go to multiple places. So, for instance, this project in Monroe, we have a application in with HUD. So I'm going to make up numbers. Let's assume this project costs $15 million. So HUD may give me $5 million. Then I go to the state and get tax credits. Maybe I get $6 million in tax credits. And then when I get tax credits, the state says, all right, well, then you have to get some bond financing. So then I may get $4 million in bond financing. So that's what we call the capital stack, where you're going around and you're layering the money until you have enough so that you can build. And that's a very long process. It takes sometimes 2 years to be able to get to construction close by the time we have all of the funding. Then we get into construction, and then after construction's completed, then we get to the final close where, all of this money gets sorted out. And tax credits are so important because an investor is giving me that $6 million, and that's $6 million less of debt that I have to put on this asset, and that's how I'm able to charge less rents because I have less debt. So it's all about keeping the debt as low as possible. So it's a very complicated process. And also in the meantime, to put in an application, my organization has to pay about $300,000 because we need to have blueprints made, we need environmental studies done.
That's a good point. Who do you work with for the construction and all that? I mean, they are sympathetic to what you're doing, but they also have, their costs have skyrocketed.
Yes, those costs have skyrocketed. We put requests for proposals out on the street. They have to have a certain amount of experience. They have to understand the state standards for construction. And so, there's several of those within the state that we work with. We don't just work with one. We mix it up as well as anybody else because sometimes they're busy too. They may not be able to put their project into their pipeline. So you have to marry up and figure out how you're going to be able to do that and who has the bandwidth to be able to take on your project.
Has that happened where you've reached the appropriate amount of funding but couldn't find or couldn't get materials needed to get a project done on time?
We have not had that effort yet. As I said, we were doing a major rehab. We had a couple things that got delayed, such as windows or some roofing material, but most things we were able to get. But of course, we paid a premium. Mm-hmm. And so that's the
changes
trade-off.
That stack, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And as far as, I have to imagine that when it's senior population, that might be a little bit of an easier sell when you're going to municipality.
Yes, that is true.
More receptive.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
So what do you do in the less receptive cases?
Well, we do our best to try to pitch what we're offering. And if a community is really dead set against working with us, then we move on to the next one. There will be places that we can go. Right now we're exploring a huge project in Stratford. We have our Monroe project. We're working with an organization in Bridgeport to help them get their project moving along. We're also working with another organization, a nonprofit in Merton that caters to women with children. They have a project that they're trying to get off the ground. So we have many projects in our pipeline. It's coming to us kind of naturally because there's such a need. So we don't need to fight with anyone. If it's going to be hard, we're going to move on to the next one.
Wouldn't a city like Bridgeport, wouldn't that help put a bigger dent in it just because of the size of the population that needs?
It would. And, if we find an opportunity in Bridgeport.
What's the problem here? Tell us.
I don't know.
This city frustrates a lot of our listeners. What is the problem here?
You mean in building affordable?
Yes. What would be an obstacle that could be removed that would help you reach your goal in a city like Bridgeport?
It's dealing with the planning and zoning departments and the permitting departments, and there's some departments that are very slow to engage you in that process, and then there's other cities that are more proactive, and sometimes Bridgeport can be a little bit challenging, but. They have staffing issues like the rest of us. The Housing Authority, Bridgeport Housing Authority, is very large. We do partner with them. We do house some of their folks, which is really important. And then, they're struggling too because they're trying to rehab stuff that they have that really nobody should be living in because it's just terrible. And, they're trying to figure out how to get the money too because HUD's not going to just write them a check. They've got to do it the same way I do it, build that capital stack.
A lot of people involved in this.
Yes.
I interview a lot of CEOs, and they always have their dashboard. What's on the dashboard? So what's on your dashboard? What is something that you'd like to see accomplished maybe, I don't know, in the next 6 to 8 months for the years out?
Wow, 6 to 8 months, that's a short timeline. But I can tell you that one of my initiatives for 2023 is property taxes. Even though we're affordable housing and I'm a nonprofit, I still pay property taxes on the assets that I own for the housing. And I don't mind paying property taxes, but I shouldn't be paying 100% like a market rate developer. If I'm only collecting 60% of the rent, then my taxes should reflect the fact that the revenue that's coming in is much less than a market rate developer. So that's been a cause of mine. And so I've been working towards that, and I've been trying to talk to local leaders to help me champion with them so that we can make that happen. Right now, there's a state statute on the books. It basically says municipalities may offer a pilot to deed-restricted affordable housing. I want to change that word may to must. That's my goal. We actually own a facility in Wilton. It's a congregate facility. Kind of think about it as assisted living light. And that's really the only kind of facility in the state of Connecticut that has a pilot. That is a state statute.
Payment in lieu
of taxes.
Taxes, right.
Right.
All right. Well, that sounds doable, right?
I hope so.
What would help you get there?
I need legislative support. I need somebody, in the House and the Senate in the state of Connecticut to help me work that through and champion with me to make that happen. So I've been talking to different people and trying to lobby to see what I can do. But, politics is politics, and it takes time.
The funding aspect. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talk over and over about there's a lot of people, very generous people in Greenwich and, mm-hmm. New Canaan and areas that are hearing us right now. Where can they learn more about what you do?
They can go to our website, cthousingpartners.org, and it showcases all the work that we do, the developments that we have. There's an opportunity to donate on the website if they are encouraged to do so. And of course, call me. I'd be happy to talk in more depth with this particular aspect. I'm happy to show people what we do. And, I'm all about educating the possibilities of what we do and why it's important in our community.
Tell us again where we can find more information.
So you can go to our website, cthousingpartners.org. You can learn all about us. And, I'd like to make people understand that affordable housing prevents homelessness. It truly does. And anyone who can help support us and provide some financial support so that as we're building the capital stack, that we're able to be more successful and build as much housing as possible.
And our legislators.
I just
had a state senator sitting in that seat last week, so they're here. They're hearing.
They are hearing, and I talked to them too. I talked to them. We were in Heim's office a couple of weeks ago. We were talking to him and the work that we're doing. He's very supportive, and we're fortunate in this state that all of our political folks that we interface with understand the need and are supportive of us trying to meet those goals.
Well, I look forward to having you back. I think there'll be plenty more to discuss, but we'll get cracking on this tonight for sure.
Okay, thanks so much.